Simcha, celebration, Simcha, Simcha, celebration of life.
Hi from me, Jared Epstein, coming to you from my house during lockdown. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to another episode of Simcha, a celebration of life. Matric learners already have a very busy schedule, but we talk to one particular matric learner, Josh Pimstein, who knows a thing or two about balancing acts. Josh is a provincial schools rugby player and Shabbat observant Jew. He chats to us about balancing his Jewish faith and his passion for rugby.
I was born into a traditional Orthodox Jewish family. We've always celebrated Jewish holidays. We've always celebrated Shabbat, and it's always been it's through our Judaism that we've really connected as a family. My family's always encouraged, for us to play sport and be active at school, and anything past that they just say is a bonus. And thankfully, I've been very privileged enough to actually achieve a number of things in sport. And it's all through the incredible support and guidance that I've had from my family right from the beginning. The first time I played rugby was probably on some family holiday on the beach, but officially was in grade 6 at the age of 12. I joined Wanderers Rugby Club, a whole group of mates. We all went together, and that's where our rugby careers began. Following on that, I actually went to go play some club rugby after the school season, and I was picked for the club rugby Lions side, the Lions RPT team, which plays in an interprovincial festival, probably a smaller scale to that of Craven Week. I played in that, and that was truly an incredible thing to be a part of, because that's where I really got my first provincial colours. Well, the biggest challenge is that most rugby is played on a Saturday afternoon. I am Shomer Shabbat, I keep the Sabbath, and obviously driving is forbidden on a Saturday. So I've just got to make bigger sacrifices, and if that means moving into the area for the Shabbat, so be it, because I'm not prepared to compromise any of the two, be it Judaism or my rugby. And so far, up until this point, it's been manageable. I've been able to do it, be it walking to a game on first day of Pesach, the first day of Passover, or sleeping 4 weeks in a row at various guest houses around South Africa to play on the Saturday. It's part of it, and I think it's one of the challenges that I've embraced playing rugby. Judaism provides people with a way to live their lives. It provides you with not so-called laws, but more a guidebook on how one should live their life, and really how one can find meaning in most aspects of life. And I really feel that, in every situation, there's always a deeper meaning in it. And I think as a sportsman, it's so true. When a player has an injury, when a player has a bad game, a good game, there's always a deeper meaning behind it. And I feel that Judaism, accompanied with sport, you're truly able to see the deeper meaning in things and really improve as a player and as a sportsman. Every person, every player has their own challenges. I know in particular a lot of the black players, that incredibly talented guys that have literally come out of townships and have been picked for these rugby teams. And the coaches are expecting you to be at 3 trainings a week in 3 different places. It's very hard for these players to get to the trainings, let alone get home from the trainings. And it really just was a reality check when you actually see the struggle of these players to get to these various trainings. And if their school doesn't send a bus, they're not going to be there. It's a really tough thing, and I think that's their biggest challenge, is actually getting around it to really see the fruits of their rugby career. All the various Lions teams, all the players and coaches have been exceptionally understanding and respectful of my commitment to Judaism. For example, there's various of the Jewish practices that they've really, found incredible. For example, every morning I put on tefillin. I remember we were sitting in Bloem during the Craven Week, and there I was putting on tefillin, and all these players, the next second, they're all crowding around me, and they all want to know, what are these boxes that I'm putting onto me, and what do they symbolize, and what do they mean, and they all want to pair. So I really think that's something that I've been privileged enough to experience, that everyone's been understanding. And also that, you know, in South Africa, I know it's so cliched, but it's so true, we are a rainbow nation. And I think we in every one of these teams, I've had the privilege of really learning and understanding and seeing the practices and the ways of all these various different cultures. One of my favorite memories was we were driving to our last game during the academy week, and all of a sudden the black players broke into song. It was such an incredible song that by the time we arrived at the game, we were all singing the song. And it's just such a beautiful thing, you know, for all of us to be singing a song in Zulu, really unifying as a side was something truly incredible.
Okay, so it was knock on by blue 11 offside.
I think for me, the biggest aspect of my Judaism that keeps me grounded as a rugby player is the faith in God. And really, you know, as a player and as a sportsman, you're going to go through various challenges in your sporting career, be it with a team, be it individually. And I really feel that ultimately you've got to just believe in a higher power. You know, you can only do as much as a player to prepare, to better yourself, but ultimately there's certain times where there's nothing more you could have done as a player, and you've just got to actually leave it into the hands of a greater power. And then ultimately, it is what it is, and you've just got to go and play the game and take in the result. And I just think it's belief. Belief is a fundamental that I've taken from Judaism to rugby.
Reva Foreman is a doyen of the South African Jewish community. Most recently, she was recognized as an honorary fellow of the World Zionist Organization. She talks to us about her relationship with Israel, growing and learning in South Africa, and how to overcome adversity.
I always say that it's very, very difficult to live with Reeva Foreman because I have to. I really wish I knew who I am. I'm not sure. I think I'm a mixture of what Hashem has put in me, my wonderful parents. I grew up in Dornfontein, which was already becoming a poor area. Many Jews had moved out. And my parents were renowned in the area for their kindness and their love to people. So I was brought up in an environment where both parents worked. And my mom would say to me, you know, my darling, whatever you want to do, you can do. God is good. And my dad would add, yeah, provided you work hard enough. And there was always a blue box on our table. When we went to shul, we went to the great Walmerin Street shul round the corner. And it was a very beautiful, simple upbringing. Commitment to being Jewish, commitment to the country, and on a practical one-to-one level, kindness to everyone who walked into our pharmacy. I did psychology honours here at Wits, and somehow I fell in love with motivational training. And I also was connected with a school in America, connected to UCLA University. So I was an empowerment motivational trainer throughout the 80s here. It was a very, very exciting time. Everyone knew the new South Africa was coming. I was in transformation training with most of the big banks and international organizations who, believe it or not, in the 80s were already employing young black people to fast move them in management. And of course, in 1991, when I saw headlines, Zionism is racism, at the Durban conference, I got a shock. I realized, but hang on, that's my other home. That's my biblical. That's my spiritual home. This is madness. How can you compare it? And my whole work during the 80s and 90s here had been transformation, overcoming discrimination and integration. That's what I love doing. So I went up to the South African Zionist Federation and I said, I want to take people to Israel. They said, are you mad? The bombs are falling. Don't be ridiculous. And I said, but I've been through this process here of conflict and conflict resolution. So I'd like to take people to Israel and meet all the people concerned. I'd like to meet all the founding organizations. I'd like to meet the government, and I'd like to meet the Palestinians. I'd like to know what I thought would be only one tour resulted in a miracle, and over the next 14 years, we took about 22 tours, and ultimately other people began to do the same thing, and I stopped taking only Jewish people. And I then, from 2010 onwards to 2016, the emphasis was on taking the media, the top political media, economic strategists, people who could make up their own minds by hearing all sides. And I trust we achieved in those years a more balanced view of a conflict, where the good and bad of both sides were shown. It gives me indeed great pleasure to welcome you all to this historic and magnificent site, Temple Israel Heritage Center, a history that reflects each and every one of you sitting in this hallowed synagogue tonight. When I heard that they were selling a synagogue, I heard it was the Mother Synagogue of Progressive Judaism. It's right in Hillbrow. It is not in an easy area. And I, with my background, thought how ideal a house of worship in an area where you have poor, disadvantaged Jewish people and equally the disadvantaged wider black community. So for me, with my background, what a magnificent base to work for my country. I knew there was a great history. I started looking into the background, and to my total shock, I realized that it was part of the actual struggle history of our country, that the original Rabbi Weiler had built the M.C. Weiler School in Alexandra in 1945. He'd gone against the government's directive, and he'd sent the Jewish woman of Hillbrow to build the finest education. So when I started to delve into the background, I realized that we're not only mentioned in Mandela's book, Long Walk to Freedom, as a congregation that withstood apartheid and Bantu education, but that the architect of our synagogue is a very famous man, Herman Kallenbach, who is a renowned Art Deco architect in this country and Mahatma Gandhi's soulmate. So when I started to delve into this, I realized that we had a platform for justice. So in 1994, we launched the Temple Israel Heritage Center. It is dedicated to fighting all forms of hatred of the other. And we hope to have events there going forward, which will show that the legacy of Mandela still lives in so many ways, with magnificent projects and people on the ground. And it's founded on what Mandela said. He said, instead of vengeance and hatred, I chose reconciliation and nation building. Let me tell you about I've had 3 awards which mean everything to me. The first, in 1983, Businesswoman of the Year, South Africa, as a baby. The next award was from the South African Jewish Board of Deputies. I was the first recipient of the Bertie Lubner Award in recognition of my work for South Africa, for the Jewish community, and for Israel. And God was good. My current accolade is an honorary fellow of the World Zionist Organization because of all those years that I took the tours, not only to Israel, but ultimately to the West Bank as well. And I was very thrilled that they honored my work on behalf of Israel and the Jewish community to search for the truth. You know what I think my greatest achievement with God's help will be is surviving adversity, and that's every man's story. You know, We lost this building when I signed a bond for it, for example, in '91. I didn't fix interest rates, and interest rates went sky high. Most people lost their homes and their businesses. In 2000, this magnificent building was sold, and I try to remember everything I talked to everyone else about surviving adversity. And in 2004, Hashem, God gave me back this building without a penny to my name in a miracle. And that was probably the greatest moment and very humbling to realize that with faith, all things are possible. Have faith, and you will draw the right inspiration and people to you to achieve your dreams and goals. We weren't born in sin. We were born in great goodness and innocence. And then we meet the world, become negative, etc. But we can reclaim that innocence and that goodness and achieve our dreams and goals.
The Ohrsom Student Centre in Cape Town is one of the newest Jewish organizations that have popped up in the city. Rabbi Sean Cannon and Rebbetzin Jody Cannon tell us more about Ohrsom, their local events and travel trips. We join in on one of their young professional events with some international guests.
Ohrsom Student started in Johannesburg, and then we opened up a centre in Cape Town, and there's also a centre in Melbourne and Sydney. So at the moment we have 4 centres, and then kind of the fulcrum of where it all comes together is our centre in Israel, because like we run the gap year there, we run various trips there, we're sending students there all the time to Sim, Yeshiva, just live there. So that's like really where it all comes together, and the Australians and South Africans and all the different groups really mix, and the different centres work really well together because we're all in the Southern Hemisphere and work on the same terms. And then we have other affiliates through Olami, like we've had groups here from Russia and France, but they're not directly under Ohrsom, but they're more like affiliates we kind of work in parallel with.
We're having a function with some Russian students who are in town, and we're just showing them kind of what's going on in Cape Town, letting them interact with some of our Cape Townian students.
Я из Москвы, Россия, сам я горский еврей, из Дагестана, то есть как бы есть такие евреи, есть ашкеназы, а есть горские евреи, вот я, собственно, горский еврей из Дербента, из Москвы.
So I'm going to speak a little bit in Hebrew and a little bit in English, just so that the Russian friends of ours from Moscow just can speak a little bit of Hebrew. So Baruchim Habayim Lekulam. A warm welcome, everybody.
It started very organically, I think in about 2015, with maybe 5-6 students going on a Cape Town trip, and then every year it's just grown and grown, where now every week we can have over 100 students learning, involved in different programs, could be even more depending on the week.
My wife Jody is really the brains behind the whole thing and kind of runs the day-to-day operations. And then I focus very much more on the strategy of how to build the organization kind of going forward, as well as on the educational content side.
Ohrsom really starts towards the end of grade 11 because we feel like that's an age where people are starting to look beyond school and asking more questions, and at a certain level of maturity. So we have weekly learning for like towards the end of grade 11, and then take them into their matric year. And then post high school we have a gap year where the kids who come in matric, quite a few of them land up going on the gap year, which is 10 months in Israel, and they do a whole variety of different things. They live in a flat in Nachlaot in Jerusalem, which is near the Shuk, with their friends. There's a whole traveling component, so they travel to India for a few weeks, they hike, they go to the Himalayas. It's like really an amazing program. And towards the end of the trip, they go to Poland and Europe. And then in Israel, there are a whole lot of different educational components. So they spend time learning in different seminaries and yeshivas, and from top class teachers in Israel. They do an internship. They do a training for MADA, which is like an ambulance medical training. They do that for about a month or so. So that's like the gap year. And then we also have like our annual trips. Then for those annual trips, they are very subsidized, and the students receive bursaries, and in return for those bursaries, they come to weekly learning. And they learn all different topics, whatever they like really are interested in, and we kind of take them on a journey. Then we also have advanced learning, so those are students who've been on our gap year or who've been to seminary and yeshiva and spent time like learning, and they want to learn more texts or in a more serious way. So then they're those. And then obviously when it's like all the chagim, like Purim or Sukkot or all of those things, and we run like kind of different events around that.
We realize the youth of today is the future of tomorrow, and the more we do for them now, the easier it will be when they come to making important decisions for their lives and where they want to go and what they want to do, that they have the information and resources required in order to make those decisions. And I think that having these events will not only bring them closer to one another and strengthen the community in that way, it will also help them grow in their Judaism and in their lives.
I think it's important to keep the Jewish students and young Jewish adults involved in their Judaism and for them to continue learning, and I think Ohrsom Student provides the platform for that.
So there's two things that I really just have felt for us at Ohrsom have been successful over the last few years, and that is just number one, being authentic. Young Jews today just spot like a lack of authenticity very quickly, and you've just got to be who you are and be natural and be normal, and I found the young Jews of Cape Town gravitate to that. The other thing is just really putting an effort into relationships. As much as the world changes and we're living in a crazy world, but at the same time, some of the fundamentals just ring more and more true all the time. And that is, having solid foundations in relationships where people know that you care. And, often I say to some of the staff at Ohrsom, they'll never care about how much you know until they know about how much you care. And so that really has stood this test of time for us.
That brings us to the end of this week's episode of Simcha, a celebration of life. As always, we'd love to hear from you, so please send us a Facebook message at Spirit Sister Productions. From me, Jared Epstein, and the Simcha team, remember, wear your mask.